All right, we are glad that you are here tonight. Some of you are here for the first time, and you are a long way behind anybody who was here last night. I'll guarantee you that, okay? So just feel behind, okay? That's all I can tell you to do. If I am a little distracted tonight, I have a reason for that. My middle daughter is right now in labor. Okay, and she is in the hospital in Tupelo, Mississippi, and she's 4 centimeters dilated. That little dude is coming. And I say dude, I should have said little dudette because it's a girl. And as soon as I'm done here, I'm hitting the road to Tupelo, Mississippi, okay? So, you know, you won't see me after. I'll be back tomorrow night, Lord willing. And but if I don't get there, my wife will slay me, okay? Not my daughter. My daughter will be okay with it, but my wife will kill me. But it is a little girl, and we're looking forward to it. And it's her first and our 4th grandchild, so it's kind of exciting times. And it was funny. My oldest daughter, she's in Florida. My wife was in Memphis. I'm here. She wasn't due until August 1st, and here she is, and nobody's there. But we're all going to get there. But we are glad that you're here. Before we get into tonight's parable, which is the parable of the Prodigal Son, it's a misnomer, okay? It's a misnomer as far as the title is concerned, okay? And we'll see that as we go through the lesson tonight. But maybe I should ask, what's a misnomer? It's easy for me to say something, but what's a misnomer? Yeah, it's really it's not named correctly. It's not titled correctly, okay? The prodigal son is only a portion of this, but it's not, it's the thing that we look at as the main portion, and the reality is it's not even the main portion. Did you know that? It was not even really why the parable was given, okay? And we'll talk about that some more. But let's talk about 2 or 3 things before we get there. First of all, let's define what a parable is. Who knows a good definition of the word parable? Come on, okay? Okay? It is a story designed to teach a lesson. Okay? When we think of stories, stories can either be true or stories can be false. Is that true? As far as a story is concerned. When I say that, a story can be made up and it looks real, or a story can be true because it comes from reality. As far as parables are concerned, which did Jesus use? Something that he just made up or something that was truth? It was a real live lesson. It's a real live event that could transpire in the life of an individual, in the life of a person. Last night, what parable did we study? Parable of the Good Samaritan. Folks, was there a road going from Jerusalem to Jericho? Yes. In fact, that road was a very winding road, and it went through mountain passes, and it was known by the Israelites as the Trail of Blood. Did you know that? The Trail of Blood. Because it was a very dangerous highway because of so many criminals that were on it. So Jesus takes this real story and he lays beside it a spiritual lesson. And the reason I use that term lays beside is because the Greek word parabole literally means to lay alongside of. So Jesus would take these real events in the lives of the Israelites, and then he would lay beside them a spiritual application, okay? So the definition of a parable is to lay alongside of. Someone has defined a parable as follows: an earthly story with a heavenly meaning. Okay? And that's a pretty good, if you really want to just chap a preacher off, if he ever asks you the definition, just say that one real quick and he'll go, oh, man, they already know what I'm talking about. Okay? Earthly story with a heavenly meaning. So there's the first point that I want to talk about very briefly. Second point is this. Every parable that Jesus ever spoke always contains one central lesson. Okay? One central lesson. Now, the reality is that in every parable, we can learn numerous lessons, okay? Hundreds of lessons throughout the parables are there for us to learn. But yet, in every parable, there is one major lesson that Jesus is desperately trying to get across to His listeners, okay? And we need to be looking for that one lesson, don't we? To the best of our ability. So if we know that, then as we read and study the parables, guess what? We're looking, aren't we? We want to know what that lesson is. And a third point that we need to make about parables is this. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes there is some background information that is given to us in the text that helps us to know exactly why this parable has been given to us. Okay, now that's not always the case. Sometimes Jesus just starts talking in parables, doesn't He? You go to Matthew the 13th chapter, and man, there's about 7 or 8 parables there, all dealing with the kingdom. And Jesus just rattles one after another off, and there's no real background information for some of those parables other than He wants them to understand the kingdom. Okay, and so He gives them those kingdom parables. So those are 3 points. The definition of a parable, the fact that a parable has one major central application, and sometimes there's background information. And you see, that background information helps me to understand the central teaching of this parable, okay? So I need you to understand that. I have asked you to do something for me, haven't I? How many of you did the homework? I heard some folks talking. How many of you did the homework? Just raise your hand, you know. I know there's a few of you. Okay, I won't ask all of you who didn't do it, okay? But I hope you did the homework. And the homework involved 4 different things, did it not? Number 1, read the text a minimum of 5 times, right? Could you have read it 100 times? Anybody do that? No. 5 times. I know. That's the reason I put a minimum on it. What was the second lesson? Title the text. But you could not use what title? The Prodigal Son. You can't do that. Okay? You can't use somebody else's title. You come up with your own title, right? The third thing that you had to do is what? Outline the text, right? And then the fourth thing that I asked you to do is what? Find 5 lessons from this text that you can make application of in somebody else's life, right? No. Now we can do that, and eventually we will do that, but that's not what we want to do. We want to make application to whom? To ourselves first, right? We want to grow from the text and learn from it. And our text is found in Luke, the 15th chapter, okay? Luke, the 15th chapter. I want to do a couple of things before I actually get into the text, okay? I want us to understand the background first, okay? And this whole chapter is really one single unit, folks, from start to finish, okay? And there's really 3 parables told in this chapter, starting at verse 3. But the background is found in verses 1 and 2, okay? So let's just start and let's read that first. Then drew near unto Him all the publicans and sinners for to hear Him. And the Pharisees and scribes murmured, saying, This man receiveth sinners, and eateth with them. And He spake this parable unto them, saying, see there? There was a reason why He spoke the parable, isn't there? What was the reason He spoke the parable? What was the circumstances that caused Him to speak these 3 parables? Yeah. Here Jesus has these sinners coming to Him. When you think of sinners, what kind of people are we talking about? Outcasts, okay. What other kind of people do you think we're talking about? The lost, okay? But you know, even in our own minds, there are good lost people and there are nasty lost people, right? You know, our next door neighbor who's a good, relatively good person who goes to work, good citizen, he's a what? He's a good lost person, right? But then we have the nasty lost people. What kind of people are those? The lowlifes, the criminals, the harlots, right? The nasty people of society. The publicans, the sinners, the harlots, the prostitutes. Folks, these were the individuals. The scum of society were drawn to Jesus. Pharisees. Does anybody know what the word means? Pharisees. What's the word mean? Anybody know? It's a sect of the Jews, right? The word means this, okay? To separate. To separate. Folks, the Pharisees were the strictest sect of the Jews when it came to the application of the law of Moses and the Talmud, okay? The commentary on the law. And these individuals had absolutely nothing to do with sinners. Ooh, nasty. Don't want anything to do with them. We don't associate with them. We don't talk with them. We don't go to their house. We don't invite them to our house. And all of a sudden, here's the master teacher. And who's he got gathered around him? The nasty people. Right? And the Pharisees look at that, and that's totally contrary to the way they behave. And so guess what they do? They criticize him, don't they? This man does what? Receiveth sinners and eateth with them. Man. And Jesus, at that point, speaks a parable unto them. In fact, 3 parables unto them. The other 2 parables are what? The parable of the lost coin, the parable of the lost sheep, and then the prodigal son, okay? Now, the next little piece of information that I'm going to give you is free. It doesn't really pertain to this lesson, but I'm going to give it to you, okay? And you can chomp on it a little bit and think about it a little bit. If you want to argue with me about it, tomorrow night when I get back, you can do that, okay? Because I won't be here after. I'm getting out of here, okay? Got a baby coming. But I want you to look at 2 verses. Look at verse 7. I say unto you that likewise joy shall be in heaven over one sinner that repenteth. Question. Does that verse say who is being joyful in heaven over the one sinner who repents? Does it tell us? Does that verse tell us? That verse doesn't tell. It just says what? There's joy in heaven, doesn't it? I'm glad she said that. She said there's another place in the Bible that says angels rejoice. Doesn't. And that's the reason I'm pointing this out. Because that's what you always hear, right? Our brother has come forward tonight. He is repenting of his sin. And tonight there is joy in the present. There is joy among the angels. That's not what the Bible says. Okay? Keep going down with me to verse 10. Likewise I say unto you, there is joy in the presence of the angels over one sinner that repenteth. Who's rejoicing, folks? There's joy. He doesn't say there's joy among the angels. He says there is joy where? In the presence of the angels. The angels are there. They are witnessing the joy. They are present, seeing the joy. But who's rejoicing? Folks, it's God who's rejoicing. My child has come home. My child has repented. The one who is dead is now alive. The one who is lost is now found. Who throws the party in the prodigal son? The daddy does, folks. It is God. Now, I'm sure that because the Father's happy, the angelic hosts are also happy, don't you? But the text says there is joy where? In the presence of the angels. the one who is elated, the one who just can't hardly hold in his joy, the one who is throwing a party is who? The Father in heaven, because his child is back. That's what we need to get out of it. That's the one who really is elated. Yeah, the angels are excited, but guess who's overjoyed? The Father. That's the one. And when you think of that, man, you know, it just goes to show how much the Father what? How much the Father really does care about his children, doesn't he? You know? He's not even scared to rejoice where? In heaven among the angels. Let them watch me. Rejoice. That's good. Okay? All right. You were asked to do these 4 things. The first thing we're going to do is, let's just read through the parable one more time, okay? And then, here's what we're going to do. I'm just going to go around and I'm going to ask you, if you will, have the courage, divulge your what? Your title to this particular parable, okay? And I've got 3 or 4, and we'll talk about some of them, all right? Let's start reading in verse 11. And he said, a certain man had 2 sons. And the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the portion of goods that falleth to me. And he divided unto them his living. And not many days after, the younger son gathered all together and took his journey into a far country. And there wasted his substance with riotous living. And when he had spent all, there arose a famine in the land. And he began to be in want. And he went and joined himself to a citizen of that country. And he sent him into the fields to feed swine. And he would fain have filled his belly with the husk that the swine did eat. And no man gave unto him. And when he came to himself, he said, how many hired servants in my father's house have bread enough to spare, and I perish with hunger? I will arise and go to my father. And I will say unto him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before thee, and am no more worthy to be called thy son. Make me as one of thy hired servants. And he arose and came to his father. But when he was yet a great way off, his father saw him and had compassion, and ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. And the son said unto him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in thy sight, and am no more worthy to be called thy son. But the father said to his servant, or said to his servants, bring forth the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet, and bring hither the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and be merry. For this my son was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found. And they began to be merry. Now his younger son was in the field, and as he came and drew nigh to the house, he heard music and dancing. And he called one of the servants and asked what these things meant. And he said unto him, thy brother is come, and thy father hath killed the fatted calf, because he hath received him, listen to these words, safe and sound. And he was angry and would not go in. Therefore came his father out and entreated him. And he answering said to his father, Lo, these many years do I serve thee, neither transgressed I at any time thy commandment, and yet thou never gavest me a kid, that I might make merry with my friends. But as soon as this thy son was come, which hath devoured thy living with harlots, thou hast killed for him the fatted calf. And he said unto him, Son, thou art ever with me, and all that I have is thine. It was meet that we should make merry and be glad. For this thy brother was dead and is alive again, and was lost and is found. Wow. We don't even have to go, we don't have to do anything else, do we? You can just go home. Man, good parable, okay? Somebody give me a good title. Now, note that. Good title. I'm kidding. What is it? The homecoming, okay? So oftentimes our titles are self-explanatory after we read the text, right? The homecoming. Now remember, what is a title supposed to do? Summarize the entirety of the parable, right? The homecoming. And folks, the only way you can come home is first what? Leave. And then at the homecoming, were there some incidences, issues that arose? Yeah, so that's not a bad title. The homecoming. Who else has got one? Oh, don't be afraid. You know, all you can do is be wrong. A certain man had two sons. Folks, that's right there in the parable. And folks, is that a bad title? Somebody, you said no? Why? Oh man, there you go. Folks, the whole story is not about one son. Remember I said a while ago that we always say, this is the parable of the prodigal son? No, it's not. It's really the parable of who? Two sons. And the reality is, it is the parable of one son. Did you know that? And which one is it? It's really about the elder brother, folks. This parable, you know, the prodigal son is only incidental to the story. Did you know that? He's not the real emphasis as far as Jesus is concerned. The real emphasis for Jesus is upon who? That older son and his attitude and his anger toward who? Toward his brother. That's where the real, so wonderful title, because it is about two sons, isn't it? And we can learn lessons from both of these sons, can't we? Yes, sir. A far country can't satisfy. If we put a comma on that and add, and neither does home sometime, would that incorporate the whole parable? You see, a far country doesn't satisfy. That's only for who? That's only for the prodigal son, right? But we've got a whole other section here about that elder brother, okay? So, good try. Just kidding. Attitude determines outcome. Now, here's one of my requirements. I didn't tell you this. Maybe I did, I don't know. If you ever give me a title and I don't understand it, or I may think, you know, how'd you get that title? Then guess what you have to do? You have to explain it to me. You have to pull the Ricky Ricardo. Explain it. Okay? Tell me what you mean. Isn't that good? You see what? You old folks are smart. It just tickled me to death. You know, you think you're so dumb and you're not. You're smart. And attitude determines what? Outcome, folks. And is that true in everything we do? Yeah. You know, now, the prodigal needed an attitude adjustment, didn't he? But so did who? So did that older brother. He needed a little adjustment. And sometimes we all need some AAs, don't we? Some attitude adjustments, okay? But attitude does determine outcome, doesn't it? Good title. Who else wants to give a title? Yes, sir. Father, son. Oh, a father's love. Man, let me ask you, can that be applied to both sons or just one? Isn't that interesting? And we miss that sometimes, folks, okay? Now, when the younger son leaves, does the father follow him? No. You don't see the father running around behind, oh, no, come back to me, come back to me. God, the father let him do what? The father let him go, didn't he? Absolutely. Sometimes we have to cut them off and let them go, don't we? Okay? But as soon as the son came back, what did the father do? He waited till he got to the door, knocked on the door, and fell on his face. Is that what he did? No. As soon as he saw him, he runs to him, doesn't he? Okay? Now, the elder brother, he won't come in, will he? I ain't going in there. That old brother of mine. Now look what happens, okay? Look at verse 28. And he was angry and would not go in. Therefore came his father out and what? Entreated him. Guys, I haven't told you this in this How to Study the Bible class that I do. One of the parts that I do is when you read, I try to teach you how to read a text, okay? And one of the things that I try to teach individuals to do is if you come across a word or a phrase that you don't know, don't pass that word up. Don't pass that phrase up. Because the minute you pass it up is the very minute that you don't understand something or you miss a valuable lesson, okay? And so here's this little word, entreated him, okay? Now, when we think of somebody entreating someone, we think about just talking to them, right? Isn't that what we think about? Just words? His father goes out to him, and he may have kept, the way we think about it, he may have kept some distance between him and his son, right? As he talked to him, because his son's what? Angry and all bent out of shape. The word entreat means to call to one side, to bring one near. Folks, guess what Dad did? Dad went out to that elder brother when he was in his anger, and he put his arm around him and sat down with him. And guess what he does? Talks to him. The father loved the elder son just as much as he loved who? That younger son, didn't he? The love of a father. A father's love. That's not a bad title to this section. And it's a wonderful thing for us, is it not? Are both sons in the wrong? Isn't that wonderful? Because sometimes Victor Eskew gets in the what? In the wrong. You know that? And guess who still loves me, and guess who still cares about me, and guess who still wants me in his home? The Father. I'm glad I have that lesson, aren't you? It's a wonderful lesson, okay? Let's do one more title. Who else? Way back yonder. The Father's door is always open. That's another good title, isn't it? Didn't close his door on his son. In fact, it's almost as if he let the front door open so he could constantly be what? Watching for his son to come. You know it? And that's a lesson we can get to in a minute. Now, I have entitled this in 3 or 4 different ways, okay? And one of my titles incorporates the background information into the title, okay? Now, remember, at the very first of this parable, I said the background was what? Somebody summarize it real quickly. What's the background? No, not of the parable. No, don't tell me the parable. The background of the parable. Why was it spoken? Yes, Jesus was receiving sinners, right? And the Pharisees were ticked, right? That's the background. My title is this: we must be able to see ourselves as we are. Is that hard to do? If the Pharisees, well, let me ask you this. Do you think the Pharisees thought that they were justified in feeling the way they did? Sure. I'm holy. I'm pure. I'm not having anything to do with those kind of people. And they thought they were okay. Were they seeing themselves the way they really were? Man, but you want to know something? By the time Jesus gets to the end of this parable, guess what he does? He shows them the way they really were, doesn't he? They thought they were righteous. And the reality is they were angry individuals over their brethren who are being drawn to Jesus. And they were just as lost as who? They were just as lost as those sinners that Jesus was receiving. Folks, we've got to be able to see ourselves the way we really are. And that's hard to do, isn't it? And you know, there's only one way to do that, isn't there? How's the only way for us to really see ourselves as we really are? One involves an attitude, one part of it involves an action. What's the attitude? If I'm really going to see myself the way I really need to see myself, what attitude do I have to have? What quality, characteristic? Huh? Humble or honest, right? I got to be honest, okay? See, it's hard to see ourselves the way we are. And then, listen to what James says. Be ye doers of the word, and not hearers only, deceiving your own selves. For if any man be a hearer of the word, and not a doer, watch this, he is like unto a man which beholdeth his natural face in a glass, or a mirror. And he beholdeth himself, and goeth his way, and straightway forgetteth what manner of man he was. Wow. Oftentimes we refer to the Bible as the mirror of God's Word, don't we? Folks, the very purpose of God's Word is for me to be able to look in that mirror, and what am I looking for? Why do you look in the mirror? Why do you look in the mirror? Yeah, you want to see what you look like, right? And you look in that mirror and my tie's all crooked. I just kind of laugh and walk off, right? And I just come over here with my tie jerked around. And y'all look at me just laughing. Look at that dumb preacher up there with that tie jerked all over his collar. Folks, I'd be like an idiot, wouldn't I? When I see my tie's out of shape, what do? Man, you straighten that tie. You women, you see your lips aren't glowing, what do? Get out the stuff, man. You know? You make certain that you're right before you go out. Folks, that's the reason God's given us His Word. Look in there, be honest, and where something's wrong, what do? Make corrections. You see? And that's what the scribes and the Pharisees were not doing on this occasion, were they? Self-righteous, don't need to listen to anything. I know I'm right about this. And when Jesus was receiving sinners, they ridiculed Him, didn't they? We've got to be able to see ourselves as we are. Another title goes along similar with yours, Two Troubled Sons. Another title, The Foolish Flees, the Jealous Jeers. Another title, Rebellion, Reception, and Rejection. Does that title cover the whole scope of this particular parable? Absolutely. And then I want you to look at the very last verse, verse 32. This one I thought of not long ago, just almost today. It was meet that we should make merry. Man. Folks, that's a wonderful title. It was meet that we should make merry. Who's talking? The Father. Who's He talking to? Which one? The elder brother. And He says, it was meet that we should make merry. What does that word, it is meet, mean? Needful, appropriate, necessary, right? Now see, that's another one of those words. It is meet that we really need to look up and understand the definition to, okay? Let me read you one of the definitions to this particular word. Thayer says this, it is necessary, there is need of, it behooves, it is right and proper. Now listen to this. Necessary, lying in the nature of the case. Necessary, brought on by the circumstances or the conduct of others toward us. Necessity of law and command, of duty, equity. Necessity established by the counsel and decree of God. Folks, the nature of the case demanded what? That we be glad. The circumstances of my brother coming back demands it. Proper equity and justice demand it, doesn't it? Somebody repents, somebody asks for forgiveness. Just justice requires what? Forgiveness. And what about the law of God? Does He require it? Absolutely. It is meet that we be glad. What a title. isn't it? And that is exactly what the Jewish leaders were not doing, right? They were not glad about these sinners and these publicans and these harlots coming to Jesus and receiving Jesus. They were all angry and bent out of shape over it. And Jesus is telling them, guys, it's meet that we be glad. You need to get over yourselves. Okay? What a title. What a title. All right. Anybody get a good outline for this chapter? This is a little bit harder. Okay? We'll do about 2 of them. Anybody do one? Anybody got the guts? I can see you don't even have the guts. Okay? There's plenty of you got them. I know you do. Okay? You just have to learn who I am. Okay? I'm not really a mean person, but I just like to have fun with you. My biggest thing is I love to see reactions, don't I, Leanne? See that, man? Greg and I, we have fun with each other because we just always... Huh? There you go. That's what I wanted to get you going, okay? Now, I didn't say get you go. Get you going, okay? Okay, and we could look at each one of those individually, couldn't we? And talk about all the actions of the younger son, all the actions of the elder son, all the actions of the father, couldn't we? And the father's actions span the whole parable, don't they? Okay? And so, yeah, that's a good outline, okay? It doesn't break down into verse-by-verse sections, but it's a good outline, okay? Anybody else outline? Okay, here we go.
Verses 11 through 12 is a harsh request.
A harsh request. Okay, a harsh request, verses 11 and 12.
13 through 16, it was a hard reality.
Okay, 13 through 16, a hard reality. This lady's already, I'm going to have to get her outline afterwards. See, she got these H's going on, don't she? Okay.
17 to 20 was a humble return.
Oh, a humble return, man, okay.
And 20 to 24 was
A happy reunion, man. Anything for the elder brother?
It was just a good homecoming.
She at least got the part with the what? Prodigal son, didn't she? Man, what an outline, folks. Man, you tell that to a preacher, he gonna preach that Sunday? That ain't no lie. You know, 4 points, boy. All I need is an introduction, conclusion, and a poem, and I got a lesson. Wonderful outline. Okay, anybody else want to give one? All right. Okay. Man, where's he focused? Jimmy's focused where? At home, isn't he? At home. And boy, could you make a good lesson about the home, just about that? Just the home in general? And then could you make another application of it spiritually? At home, The whole parable revolves around what? The home, doesn't it? Boy leaves his home, a boy comes back home, a father is at home, a younger brother's at home, and there's what? Trouble in the home, isn't there? Man. See, this is what excites me. I don't know if this excites you. Okay, you may go, oh, this preacher just bored me to death. But this stuff excites me, man. Okay, hearing all these different applications of the text, it's wonderful. Now, let me show you what I did with this parable, okay? Now, and I try to do what you did, okay? I just try to follow the text and make my points, okay? And there's no right or wrong on outlining. I want you to understand that. See, that's where you get scared and you think there's right or wrong. There's really not right or wrong. And depending upon how many are in a crowd, we can have that many outlines, can't we? Okay? Here's my outline. Point number 1. It's verses 11 through 12a. The desire. And he said, a certain man had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, Father, what does he say? Give me the portion of goods that falleth to me. He had a what? He had a desire for his what? For his goods, didn't he? Okay, he had a desire for his goods. The second part of that verse is my next point. The division. And He divided unto them His living. So there's the desire, then the what? The division. Okay? Now this next one, y'all are going to think I've titled a certain way, and I probably didn't, but notice what it says. And not many days after, the younger son gathered all together and took his journey into a far country. What could we call that? The desire, the division. Now what do we have? The departure. See, I knew everybody'd think that. That's not what I titled it, but that's what it could be titled, the departure. Couldn't it? Because that's what he did. He left home, didn't he? But I incorporate all the way down through the end of this particular text, down through verse 16, okay? And I call it the decadence. The decadence. Folks, this young man leaves and he lives an ungodly life, does he not? And the text focuses on it, doesn't it? Spent all his substance on what? Riotous living. Hires on with a man in a what? Far country, a country outside the land of what? Outside the land of Palestine. Takes a job doing what? Feeding pigs. An unclean animal for a who? For a Jew. And then guess what he wanted? Give me them husks. That's a pretty nasty life, isn't it? That's a decadent life, folks. That's a life without God, isn't it? So the decadence, okay? Notice the next point. The declaration, verses 17 through 19. How many hired servants of my father's have bread enough and to spare, and I perish with hunger? I will arise, go to my father, and will say unto him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before thee, and am no more worthy to be called thy son. Make me as one of thy hired servants. The declaration, it's almost as if he shouts this out, doesn't he? One day he wakes up in the hog pen, what does he say? What in the world am I doing here? Right? You see that little phrase right there, folks? No more worthy. Okay? In our minds, we know what that means, right? No more worthy. You need to go look it up. Because see, in the Greek language sometimes, it's a very picturesque language, okay? And not only does it have a definition, but sometimes there's pictures that are there. I'm no more worthy to be called what? Thy son. Here's the picture. Seen those weigh scales that have two sides on them? Okay? You put all the qualities of a son on one side, and then the prodigal son says what? You set me on the other side. You weigh me out. And guess what? I'm no more worthy to be called thy son. He doesn't have enough qualities anymore that he feels will make him what? Balance to be a son. Okay, I'm not worthy. Just make me a what? Just make me a servant. That's all I'm worthy of. Has he got a good picture of himself now? Man, attitude adjustment, right? Big one, okay? So there's the declaration. Verses 20 through 24, the delight, okay? And that's whose delight? The Father's. And then 25 through 32, the displeasure of who? Of the elder son. So there's my outline, okay, for this particular text. I'll start with a what? With a D. Now, I'm going to leave this week, okay, and what I'm hoping you'll do is this. I'm hoping you'll take this method of Bible study and you will start using it on a regular basis. Folks, you can take any text of Scripture and you can use this, okay? Doesn't matter what it is, and you can use it. Oh, man. I didn't need that. That's an update on my daughter. She's all right. 7 centimeters. Oh, I'm not going to make it. Bet you've never had a preacher standing up here waiting on a grandkid, have you? Unbelievable. All right, now, now we've outlined the text, okay? Now what's the next thing we have to do? We got to look for what? Lessons. Folks, have we already been learning lessons? Oh man, if you hadn't already been learning lessons, you need to go home because you've been asleep in here, okay? We've already been looking at lessons, haven't we? And see, that's the good thing about this. When you're titling the text and when you're outlining the text and putting titles on those big points, every time you're finding what? All kinds of lessons, all kinds of applications that can be made. And here's what's amazing, folks. You can do this on the prodigal son today. Go throw it in a drawer, and 2 years from now, don't get your notes out. Do it all over on what? On the prodigal son. And guess what? Your outline will be different, your title will be different, and you'll find even more lessons that you didn't find. And then you'll pick up your notes and you'll say, man, I didn't even see that this time, but I saw it last time. Or what? I didn't see it last time and I did see it this time. It's amazing. And then somebody else will come around, you'll be talking to them and they'll say a lesson and you go, where in the world did you get that? I never saw that, okay? Because guess what, folks? You can't plumb the depth of God's Word, can you? You never can. You can never mine all the jewels that are in the text. And so let's talk about this for just a minute. True or false? Lesson number 1. Sometimes children make demands of their parents. Yeah. If you're laughing a little bit, it's because what? Your kids made a demand. Dad, give me a car. What are you talking about, boy? You know? But here's a son comes and what does he want? I want my inheritance. Was he the elder? No. Folks, the elder got double portion, and this man gets his portion. He gets a third, and the son gets what? The elder gets what? 2/3, okay? So he gets 1/3 of his father's inheritance. True or false? The father had to give him the inheritance. No. False. Usually I'll look at somebody and go, thanks for playing. No, he didn't have to. But he what? But he did, okay? And folks, you want to know what that is? That was God's grace to this son. Did you know that? He gave him what he asked for. Do we sometimes give our children what they ask for even though we know this ain't good? Sometimes we do, don't we? And guess what? Sometimes God does. Sometimes God allows us to do what we want to do, have what we want to have, even though He knows what? He knows good and well something's going to happen. Now, why would you do that? You know, I don't want my kid to get hurt. I don't want him to experience the bad things of the world. But sometimes you have to, don't you? Because they have to what? Got to learn the lesson, don't they? And sometimes those natural consequences are better than any warnings that mom or dad could tell a kid, aren't they? Just good old natural consequences. One time I came home and I got the mail out. It's this daughter who's in labor right now, in fact. And it said, from the state of, Wyoming, the Department of Justice. And it's addressed to my daughter. What in the world does the state of Wyoming's Department of Justice have to do with my daughter? So guess what Vic does? I broke the law. I opened her mail. Read that letter and it says, you have successfully completed your safety driving course and have made the $230 payment on your speeding ticket, and this will not be on your record. First I'd ever heard about that. Bail. That's the second one too, isn't it? I just laid it on the table. Didn't say another word. 1 week, my daughter said, Dad, I was miserable every time I passed you in the hall. She said, I know you saw the letter, and you never said a word. Not one word. My wife knew all about it. Lauren knew all about it. Everybody knew all about it except Dad. Now, I didn't give her any more consequences. You want to know why? Safety driving course, $230. She's doing 100 in a 65. It was late at night, out in Wyoming, nobody out, wanted to get home, moving, man. 230, all she had was a little job, part-time, $230. Folks, that's 10 years ago. And then for 1 week, knowing Dad knew and he didn't say nothing. Natural consequences. All right, thank you guys, I appreciate it.